They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I never understood that phrase until I found myself sitting in that sterile conference room, watching my daughter-in-law's face crumble as the recording played back her own words. $2 million. That's what she thought she could steal from me. That's what she thought I'd never discover. But I did more than discover it. I orchestrated her downfall with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a predator. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I became. What I had to become to survive the betrayal that nearly destroyed everything I'd built over 43 years of marriage. If you're watching this, you understand that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who cut the deepest. Before we go any further into this story, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button if you've ever felt betrayed by family, and subscribe to this channel because what I'm about to tell you will change how you see trust forever. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when I still believed in the fairy tale. When I still thought that marriage was about love and partnership, and that family meant loyalty. I was 22 when I married Richard, and God, I thought I was so lucky. He was established, successful, with his family's construction business already thriving. I walked into that marriage thinking I was walking into security, into a life where I'd never want for anything again. But the Ashford family didn't want me. They never wanted me. Richard's mother, Catherine, made that clear from our engagement party onward. I was too young, too naive, not sophisticated enough for their precious son. I remember the first family dinner after our honey meal, sitting at that massive mahogany table while Catherine criticized everything from my posture to my choice of wine glass. She never addressed me directly, always through Richard. Richard, perhaps your wife would be more comfortable in the smaller dining room for casual meals. Richard, your wife might benefit from some guidance on appropriate dinner conversation. I swallowed every slight, every snide comment, every deliberate exclusion. I told myself it would get better when Richard and I had children, when I proved myself worthy of the Ashford name. I threw myself into being the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect daughter-in-law. I learned their customs, their preferences, their unspoken rules about everything from table settings to charity events. I made myself indispensable to their social calendar, their business entertaining, their family gatherings, and slowly, very slowly, I carved out my place in that family. When Richard's father died 12 years into our marriage, I was there. I planned the funeral, managed the logistics, comforted the grieving relatives. When Catherine had her stroke 3 years later, I was the one who managed her care, who made the difficult decisions Richard couldn't face. I became the Ashford family matriarch by default, by necessity, by sheer determination. The business grew. Richard was brilliant with commercial contracts, but I had the vision for expansion. I suggested the residential developments, the luxury subdivisions that tripled our revenue. I managed the books, negotiated with suppliers, built relationships with city planners and zoning officials. The Ashford name became synonymous with quality construction across 3 counties, and I was half the reason why. Our son Michael was born when I was 31, and for a brief moment, I thought I had everything I'd ever wanted. A beautiful child, a successful marriage, financial security beyond anything I'd dreamed of as a girl. Michael was brilliant, charming, everything we'd hoped for. I poured myself into raising him, ensuring he had every advantage, every opportunity. Private schools, tutors, summer programs in Europe, connections that would serve him for life. But children grow up. They make their own choices. They bring home people who change everything. Jennifer Walsh entered our lives like a storm surge, beautiful and destructive and impossible to ignore. Michael met her during his senior year at Northwestern, and within 6 months he was talking about marriage. She was smart, I'll give her that. Smart enough to charm Richard completely, smart enough to present herself as the perfect addition to our family. Young, ambitious, from a good family, as Richard put it, though I noticed her parents never seemed to have much money despite their supposed connections. I should have trusted my instincts then. Something about Jennifer always felt calculated, rehearsed. The way she laughed at Richard's jokes just a beat too late, as if she was thinking about it first. The way she always complimented me on things that didn't matter. My earrings, my handwriting, my choice of flowers. While never acknowledging anything substantial I contributed to family discussions. She was playing a role, and she was very good at it. The wedding was everything Jennifer wanted and nothing like what I'd envisioned for my son. Elaborate, expensive, with guest lists that prioritized her social media presence over meaningful relationships. But I paid for it all, smiled through every decision that ignored my input, and welcomed Jennifer into our family with grace I didn't feel. The first few years were manageable. Jennifer seemed content to play the role of dutiful daughter-in-law while she established her marketing career. She and Michael lived in the guest house on our property, supposedly saving money for their own place. I helped her land consulting contracts through our business connections. I included her in family decisions, taught her about our investments, our properties, our financial planning. I thought I was nurturing a partnership that would strengthen our family legacy. I was building the weapon she'd eventually use against me. The cracks started showing around their 5th year of marriage. Small things at first, Jennifer questioning my decisions about family gatherings, suggesting changes to traditions we'd maintained for decades. She started excluding me from conversations with Michael about their future plans, their career decisions, their financial goals. When I'd ask about something I'd overheard, she'd smile that brittle smile and say they were still working through the details. Then Richard got sick, pancreatic cancer, stage 4, diagnosed on a Tuesday morning that split my life into before and after. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 4. Those 4 months revealed everything about who Jennifer really was. While I was caring for my dying husband, managing his pain, his treatments, his affairs, Jennifer was positioning herself as the family's financial decision-maker. She convinced Michael that I was too emotional to handle business decisions during Richard's illness. She suggested they needed power of attorney to protect the family assets during this difficult time. She presented herself as the stable, rational voice while painting me as a grieving widow, too distraught to think clearly. Richard, weakened by chemotherapy and desperate to ensure his family's security, signed documents I barely had time to review. Jennifer had drafted them, she explained, with the help of family lawyers I'd never met. The language was complex, full of legal terminology I didn't fully understand, but Richard trusted his daughter-in-law. He trusted that she wanted what was best for our family. I was so focused on his comfort, his dignity in dying, that I didn't pay enough attention to what she was doing. My husband died believing he was protecting us all. The reading of the will 2 weeks after the funeral was my first real glimpse of Jennifer's long game. Richard had changed several key provisions in the months before his death, supposedly to streamline the inheritance process and minimize tax implications. The changes meant that while I inherited our primary residence and a substantial portion of the liquid assets, the business and most of the real estate portfolio went into a trust controlled by Michael and Jennifer jointly. On the surface, it made sense. Michael was Richard's only heir, and Jennifer was his wife. They were young, ambitious, better positioned to manage active business investments. I was in my 60s, recently widowed, supposedly ready to step back from business responsibilities. The arrangement looked reasonable to everyone outside our family, but I knew Jennifer had orchestrated it all. The timing, the language, the very lawyers Richard had consulted, all of it connected back to her suggestions, her research, her helpful contributions to estate planning. She'd spent months manipulating a dying man to restructure his will in her favor, and she'd done it so skillfully that even I couldn't prove it without looking vindictive and paranoid. The months after Richard's death were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Jennifer didn't cut me off immediately. That would have been too obvious, too cruel, too likely to generate sympathy for me from other family members and business associates. Instead, she began a slow, systematic campaign of marginalization. First, she suggested I needed time to grieve, that handling business decisions too soon after Richard's death might be overwhelming. She and Michael would manage things temporarily, just until I felt ready to engage again. When I protested that staying involved in the business would help me process my grief, she expressed concern about my emotional state and its impact on important decisions. She documented everything. Every conversation where I got frustrated, every meeting where I pushed back against their suggestions, every moment where my grief showed through my professional facade. She built a careful record of a grieving widow who was struggling to cope, and not quite herself, after her husband's death. Meanwhile, she was systematically removing my access to information and decision-making processes. Business meetings were scheduled without consulting me. Financial reports came to me days after Jennifer and Michael had already discussed them. Vendor contracts were renewed or renegotiated without my input. When I questioned these changes, Jennifer would express surprise that I wasn't taking the time I needed to heal. The cruelest part was how she used Michael against me. My son, grieving his father and overwhelmed by sudden business responsibilities, genuinely believed Jennifer was protecting both him and me from unnecessary stress. When I tried to explain what was happening, he saw a bitter mother undermining his wife instead of a woman fighting for her life's work. Jennifer was brilliant at managing appearances. In public, at family gatherings, at business events, she was deferential, respectful, constantly checking with me about decisions and including me in conversations. But in private, in the boardroom, in the actual mechanisms of power, I was being systematically excluded from everything Richard and I had built together. 6 months after Richard's death, I realized I was being pushed out of my own life. The business I'd helped build was operating without me. The properties I'd selected and developed were being managed without my input. The financial portfolio I'd helped grow was being restructured without my knowledge. I was becoming a figurehead in my own family, but I still had legal rights, substantial assets, and decades of business relationships. Jennifer needed something more decisive, more permanent, to complete her takeover. She needed me to make a mistake big enough to justify removing me from family finances entirely. So she created one. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Jennifer came to me with a proposal for a real estate investment that seemed perfect for our portfolio. A luxury development project in an emerging neighborhood, with connections to city planning that would guarantee substantial returns. The initial investment was significant, $2 million, but the projected profits were enormous. She presented detailed projections, architectural plans, permits, everything needed to make the investment look legitimate and profitable. She explained that Michael was hesitant about the size of the investment, that he thought we should start smaller in this new market. But she believed in the opportunity and thought I, with my experience in real estate development, would see its potential. The flattery worked. After months of being treated like I was mentally incompetent, here was Jennifer acknowledging my expertise, asking for my guidance, trusting my judgment on a major financial decision. She needed my signature on the investment documents because the money would come from accounts I still controlled. It felt like the partnership I'd thought we were building. I should have been suspicious that she didn't want Michael involved in the initial paperwork. She explained that she wanted to surprise him with my confidence in the project, that bringing me in as the lead investor would help repair the tension that had developed between us. Once we'd committed to the investment together, she'd reveal the partnership to Michael as a fait accompli. The documents looked legitimate. The bank transfers went through proper channels. The investment appeared in our financial records exactly as Jennifer had described. For 3 months, I felt like I was back in control of part of our financial future. Then the project disappeared. Not the physical development. That was never real. The paperwork, the permits, the city connections, all of it had been fabricated. The $2 million had gone into accounts controlled by Jennifer, then moved again into investments I couldn't trace. When I tried to investigate, I discovered that the development company had never existed. The permits were forgeries, and the city planning contacts were fictional. I'd been completely, systematically defrauded by my own daughter-in-law. But Jennifer's plan was more sophisticated than simple theft. She'd created a paper trail that made it look like I had made the investment decision independently, against family advice, despite warnings from both her and Michael. When the fraud was discovered, she positioned herself as the one who'd tried to protect family assets from my poor judgment. The narrative was devastating and seemingly airtight. A grieving widow, not thinking clearly after her husband's death, had made an impulsive investment decision that lost the family $2 million. Jennifer and Michael had tried to guide me toward more conservative choices, but I'd overruled them, insisting on this risky venture based on emotions rather than analysis. Michael believed it completely. Our accountants believed it. Our lawyers believed it. Everyone saw a woman whose grief had compromised her judgment, exactly as Jennifer had spent months setting up. The family meeting where this was all revealed was the lowest point of my life. Michael looked at me with such disappointment, such profound sadness, that I knew our relationship would never recover. He talked about the need for more structured oversight of family investments, about protecting everyone from similar mistakes in the future. Jennifer sat beside him, radiating concern and support, occasionally touching his arm in comfort while I was systematically stripped of financial authority. They didn't cut me off entirely. I kept the house, kept a generous monthly allowance, kept enough assets to live comfortably for the rest of my life. But I was no longer a decision maker, no longer a partner in the family business, no longer someone whose opinion mattered in important conversations. I'd been managed into irrelevance, and I had only myself to blame for trusting the person who'd orchestrated my destruction. But here's what Jennifer didn't know about me. I've never been someone who accepts defeat gracefully. The first year after the investment disaster was the hardest of my life. I was isolated from the family business, excluded from important decisions, treated with the kind of patronizing kindness reserved for elderly relatives who can't quite manage their own affairs anymore. Jennifer had won so completely that fighting back seemed impossible, but I've never been someone who gives up easily. Richard used to say I was like a dog with a bone when something mattered to me, and this mattered more than anything I'd ever fought for. This was my life, my legacy, my family's future, and I wasn't going to let Jennifer destroy it without consequences. I started with research. Careful, methodical investigation into every aspect of Jennifer's life, her background, her family, her finances, her business dealings. I hired private investigators, discreetly, paying with cash from accounts Jennifer didn't monitor. I spent months building a complete picture of who my daughter-in-law really was. The results were illuminating. Jennifer Walsh had built her entire adult life on carefully constructed lies. Her good family was middle class at best, with a father who'd gone through bankruptcy twice and a mother who'd never held a steady job. Her college credentials were accurate, but she'd graduated with substantial debt that she'd never mentioned to Michael. Her early career had involved 2 companies that had failed under suspicious circumstances, leaving investors with significant losses. Most importantly, I discovered that the real estate fraud wasn't her first attempt at financial manipulation. She'd been involved in at least 3 similar schemes over the past decade, always positioning herself as the innocent party when things went wrong, always walking away with more money than she'd started with. Jennifer Walsh was a professional predator, and my family had been her most successful target. But evidence alone wouldn't be enough to expose her. She was too smart, too careful, too skilled at manipulating appearances. I needed her to reveal herself, to make mistakes that couldn't be explained away or blamed on others. I needed her to confess, so I began the most complex performance of my life. I became the broken, defeated woman Jennifer expected me to be. I let her see my isolation, my depression, my apparent acceptance of my diminished role in the family. I played the part of a grieving widow who'd lost her confidence along with her husband, someone who no longer trusted her own judgment about anything important. The performance worked. Over the course of several months, Jennifer's guard came down. She began talking to me more openly about family finances, about her plans for the business, about her vision for our future. She started treating me like a confidant rather than a threat, sharing details she never would have revealed if she'd seen me as capable of using them against her. I encouraged these conversations. I asked questions that seemed to come from genuine interest rather than investigation. I expressed admiration for her business acumen, her ability to manage complex financial decisions, her skill at protecting the family's interests. I let her believe I was genuinely grateful for her leadership during such a difficult time, and slowly, carefully, I started recording our conversations. Not every conversation, not obviously, but strategically. I used equipment the investigators had recommended, small devices that could capture clear audio without being detected. I documented Jennifer's increasingly candid admissions about her manipulation of family finances, her real opinion of my intelligence, her long-term plans for marginalizing me even further. The breakthrough came during a family dinner 6 months into my investigation. Michael had been called away on a business emergency, leaving Jennifer and me alone with wine and what she thought was unguarded conversation. I'd been playing the part of the defeated matriarch so convincingly that she felt safe being completely honest about her contempt for me and her satisfaction at having outmaneuvered someone she considered intellectually inferior. That's when she told me the truth about the $2 million. She didn't just steal it. She'd been planning the theft for over a year, carefully studying our financial systems, identifying vulnerabilities, building the fake investment opportunity piece by piece. She'd chosen real estate because she knew it was an area where I'd feel confident, where my ego would make me susceptible to flattery about my expertise. But the most damning part was what she planned to do next. The $2 million was just the beginning. She'd been systematically moving family assets into investments that appeared legitimate, but were actually vehicles for transferring money into accounts she controlled. Over the next 5 years, She estimated she could redirect nearly half of our family's wealth without anyone noticing until it was too late to recover. She was planning to destroy us financially, bit by bit, while maintaining the facade of being the devoted daughter-in-law protecting family interests. And she was enjoying it. The power, the deception, the intellectual challenge of outmaneuvering people who should have been too smart to fall for her schemes. Jennifer had never loved Michael, had never wanted to be part of our family. We were nothing more than marks in an elaborate long-term con game. I recorded every word. Before I go further with this story, I want to know where you're watching this from. Take a moment and tell me in the comments below what city and country you're in. It helps me understand who's connecting with stories like this, and believe me, what comes next is going to resonate with people everywhere who've been betrayed by family. Building a legal case against Jennifer required more than recordings. I needed documentation, expert analysis, evidence that would hold up in court and convince Michael that everything he believed about his wife was wrong. The hardest part was doing this investigation while maintaining my performance as the broken, harmless widow Jennifer expected me to be. I assembled a team of specialists, forensic accountants who could trace the movement of stolen funds, legal experts who understood financial fraud, investigators who could document Jennifer's history of similar crimes. I paid for everything through accounts Jennifer didn't monitor, using inheritance money she hadn't figured out how to access. The forensic accounting alone took 4 months. Every transaction, every investment, every financial decision Jennifer had influenced needed to be analyzed and traced. The pattern that emerged was stunning in its complexity and ruthlessness. She hadn't just stolen $2 million. She'd been systematically looting our family's wealth for over 3 years, using increasingly sophisticated methods to hide the transfers. The fake real estate investment was actually the smallest part of her theft. She'd been manipulating business expenses, creating fictional consulting contracts, establishing offshore accounts through shell companies she controlled. The total amount she'd stolen was approaching $8 million, nearly a quarter of our family's net worth. But the most devastating discovery was how she'd manipulated Michael. Every major financial decision he'd made since Richard's death had been influenced by Jennifer's careful guidance toward options that served her interests rather than the family's. She'd been using my son's grief and inexperience to make him an unwitting accomplice in his own family's destruction. The psychological evaluation was almost harder to read than the financial analysis. The expert I'd hired described Jennifer as a sophisticated sociopath with narcissistic personality disorder, someone capable of long-term manipulation without any genuine emotional connection to her targets. Her marriage to Michael, her relationship with me, her integration into our family, all of it had been calculated performance designed to access our wealth. She'd never loved any of us. We'd been nothing more than a profitable long-term project. By the time I had enough evidence to act, I understood that exposing Jennifer would destroy more than just her. Michael would be devastated by the revelation that his marriage was a fraud, that the woman he'd loved and trusted had been systematically stealing from his family. Our business relationships would be damaged by the scandal. Our family's reputation would never fully recover. But the alternative was letting her continue until she'd destroyed everything Richard and I had built together. The confrontation had to be perfect. One chance to present evidence so overwhelming that Jennifer couldn't manipulate her way out of it, so carefully documented that even Michael couldn't deny the reality of what she'd done. I spent weeks planning every detail, anticipating every possible response, preparing for every way she might try to deflect blame or create doubt. I scheduled a family financial review meeting, supposedly to discuss some routine investment adjustments I wanted to make with my remaining assets. Jennifer and Michael both attended, expecting nothing more than another opportunity to demonstrate my diminished capacity for financial decision-making. I let them go through their usual routine, their careful explanations of why my ideas weren't quite practical, their gentle suggestions for more conservative approaches. I played the part of the confused older woman, asking questions that seemed to come from genuine bewilderment, rather than strategic investigation. Then I brought out the recordings. The first one was Jennifer's casual admission that she'd never expected me to be intelligent enough to figure out the real estate fraud. The second was her description of how easy it had been to manipulate Richard during his final months. The third was her detailed explanation of the 5-year plan to redirect our family's wealth into accounts she controlled. I watched Jennifer's face change as she realized what was happening. The confident, condescending mask disappeared, replaced by something calculating and dangerous. She looked like a predator who'd suddenly realized she was trapped. Michael's reaction was everything I'd expected and nothing I was prepared for. The confusion, the disbelief, the desperate hope that there was some explanation that would make everything make sense again. He looked between Jennifer and me like we were strangers, like he'd never seen either of us before. Jennifer tried to salvage the situation. She claimed the recordings were fake, taken out of context, misunderstood. She insisted that everything she'd done had been to protect the family from my poor judgment, that the money transfers were legitimate investments I'd simply failed to understand. She portrayed herself as the victim of a vindictive mother-in-law who couldn't accept losing control of family finances. But I had more than recordings. I had the forensic accounting reports, the documentation of her criminal history, the expert psychological evaluation, the paper trail of $8 million in systematic theft. I had evidence so comprehensive and devastating that even Jennifer's considerable manipulation skills couldn't explain it away. The meeting lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of Jennifer alternating between denial, attacks on my credibility, attempts to manipulate Michael's emotions, and finally, desperate offers to make restitution if we'd handle everything privately. 6 hours of watching my son's world collapse as he realized that everything he'd believed about his marriage, his family, his own judgment, had been carefully constructed lies. By the end, Jennifer wasn't even trying to maintain her facade anymore. The mask had completely dropped, revealing someone cold and calculating and utterly without remorse for the pain she'd caused. She was angry about being caught, frustrated by the failure of her long-term plan. But she showed no genuine emotion about betraying people who'd trusted her completely. The legal proceedings that followed were complex and protracted. Jennifer had been very careful about how she'd structured her thefts, using legal loopholes and offshore accounts that made recovery difficult, even with clear evidence of fraud. Her criminal defense team was expensive and aggressive, fighting every charge and attempting to shift blame onto me for supposedly facilitating the thefts through poor oversight. The civil case was even more brutal. Jennifer countersued, claiming that I had entrapped her, that the recordings were illegal, that the entire investigation was a vindictive attack by a bitter mother-in-law who couldn't accept her son's independence. She portrayed herself as a devoted wife who'd been trying to protect her husband from his mother's financial incompetence. The media attention was devastating. Our family's private business became public entertainment, with Jennifer positioning herself as the victim of a wealthy family's internal power struggle. She gave interviews describing me as controlling and manipulative, someone who'd resented her from the beginning and had orchestrated the entire scandal to destroy her marriage to Michael. Some people believed her. The narrative of the evil mother-in-law who couldn't let go of control was compelling, especially when presented by someone as articulate and sympathetic as Jennifer could appear when necessary. For months, I endured speculation about my mental state, my motivations, my fitness to manage family finances, but the evidence was overwhelming. The forensic accounting couldn't be disputed. The recorded confessions couldn't be explained away. Jennifer's history of similar frauds couldn't be ignored. Slowly, methodically, the legal system worked through the complexity of the case and reached the only possible conclusion: Jennifer Walsh had systematically defrauded the Ashford family of over $8 million through carefully planned financial manipulation spanning multiple years. Criminal conviction came first. 3 counts of grand theft, 2 counts of fraud, 1 count of money laundering. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in federal prison, with requirements to pay full restitution to our family. The civil judgment was even more comprehensive, awarding us damages that exceeded the original theft amounts and ensuring that Jennifer would never profit from her crimes against us. But the personal cost was incalculable. Michael divorced Jennifer immediately after her conviction, but the damage to our relationship was permanent. He blamed himself for being manipulated, blamed me for not exposing Jennifer sooner, blamed everyone except the person who'd actually committed the crimes. The son I'd loved and protected and sacrificed for could barely look at me without being reminded of his own vulnerability to deception. Our family business survived, but barely. The scandal had damaged relationships with clients, partners, financial institutions. We recovered most of the stolen money, but the reputation we'd built over decades was permanently tarnished. Some people would always wonder whether there might be truth to Jennifer's claims about my role in the whole situation. The victory I'd fought so hard to achieve felt hollow when I finally held it. Jennifer was in prison. Our money was recovered, the truth was officially acknowledged. But I was alone in a house that felt empty, estranged from a son who couldn't forgive any of us for what had happened, surrounded by the ruins of relationships that could never be repaired. I got my revenge. I proved that Jennifer Walsh was exactly what I'd suspected from the beginning, a predator who targeted our family for systematic destruction. I'd exposed her completely, destroyed her carefully constructed facade, ensured that she'd pay the full price for her crimes against us. But I'd also lost everything that actually mattered. My son, my family unity, my sense of home, my peace of mind. The war I'd fought so determinedly had left casualties I hadn't anticipated, and consequences I couldn't undo. Jennifer's final letter to me came from federal prison 6 months into her sentence. No apology, no admission of genuine remorse, just a cold analysis of what she called my Pyrrhic victory. She pointed out that while she'd lost her freedom temporarily, I'd lost my family permanently. While her crimes had cost her 12 years, my revenge had cost me the rest of my life. She was right, and she knew I knew she was right. That was her final act of cruelty. Making sure I understood that even in defeat, she'd managed to destroy what I cared about most. I sit in this house now, surrounded by recovered assets that feel meaningless, reading legal documents that confirm my victory in a war that cost me everything worth winning. Michael calls occasionally, dutiful conversations that feel like obligations rather than genuine connection. The business continues to operate successfully, generating wealth I no longer have anyone meaningful to share with. I got my revenge against Jennifer Walsh. I proved she was a calculating predator who'd targeted our family for systematic destruction. I exposed every lie, recovered every stolen dollar, ensured she'd pay the full price for betraying people who'd trusted her completely. But late at night, when the house is quiet and the victory feels most hollow, I wonder whether she actually won after all. She took 12 years from me through theft and deception, but I gave her the rest of my life through the very process of stopping her. The recording device that captured her confession about the $2 million is still in my desk drawer. Sometimes I listen to it, hearing her casual contempt for my intelligence, her satisfaction at having outmaneuvered someone she considered inferior. Her voice sounds exactly the same as it did during all those family dinners when I thought she was learning to love us. I pretended to trust my greedy daughter-in-law, and I was recording her confession about the money. But the real confession is mine. I chose revenge over reconciliation, justice over family, victory over peace. I won every legal battle and lost the only war that actually mattered. That's the truth Jennifer knew I'd eventually understand. Some victories cost more than defeats, and some justice comes at prices too high to pay. I got everything I fought for and discovered it wasn't worth what I'd given up to get it. The screen is fading now, and this story is ending. But before it does, I need you to do something for me one more time. Hit that like button if this story moved you, and subscribe to this channel because stories like this need to be heard. Don't let what happened to my family happen to yours.